The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fox Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I wanted to take some time, in particular over the Law Reform and Revision Amendment Bill, and to perhaps make tangentially some comments about the other two bills, but I'm really taking the opportunity to talk about law reform and revision, and even that not so centrally, but as an opportunity to explain to some extent how things work in terms of legislation and why this is important. And to say in anticipation that there's probably going to be a new law reform commissioner appointed subsequent to this bill being passed. And that person will be employing considerable legal skills, having just retired from active duty as a judge.
That's how we do it. That's how we do it.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. But in doing so, and in anticipation of that, I want to do two things. First of all, the former president of the Court of Appeal is now retired. He was my classmate at St. Augustine's College.
Where's that?
St. Augustine's College. Yeah, right. Michael Barnett. And I think I've often said this, from the time he was a student in high school, from the very first 6th grade class or 7th grade class, whatever, they used to call Form 1 in those days, 7th grade class, now 7th grade. This man obviously wanted to be a lawyer. So we had this speech contest that we had to all learn these speeches. And we all had to choose a speech. And he chose a speech from Clarence Darrow's last address to the jury. You know, in the Scopes case, we come now to lay this man's case before the jury. That was Michael Barnett in the 7th grade. And he never deviated from that. And has turned out to be a good judge, I think. Had the right temperament for the job and understood. So he's now retired. We're on different political sides, but notwithstanding that, you know, he was a pretty good judge. Say? Yeah, right. He served as attorney. He served as Attorney General in Ingram's administration. How you think he got there? He wasn't a PLP, I assure you. But good all the same. But succeeding him as president of the Court of Appeal is a person rather more personally connected to me, and I wanted to take this opportunity because the exigencies of my job on so many of these family occasions does not allow me to be at some of these ceremonies. So John Isaacs, who is now to be president of the Court of Appeal, is actually my second cousin. Our grandmothers were sisters. Bertha Isaacs was his grandmother. She was a Hannah. My grandmother was Gwenny Ford. She was a Hannah, Robert Hannah's daughters. And the connection is rather closer than that because as children, my great-grandfather had a home on East Bay Street. We still own the property today, which is right next to what then was Kelly's Bakery, but it's between Flowers Place and the East Bay Shopping Center. So it's a vacant property now. And as children, we all gathered there on a Friday afternoon, every Friday afternoon, and with the sisters, the grandmothers, the daughters, and all their children gathered there from about 3 o'clock after school closed, and we were there until dark. And that's where we learned to swim. Used to go across, swim in the waters across the street at Bay Street. In 1965, at the age of, I think it was 11 or 12, his mother was from Jamaica and married Sammy Isaacs, who was one of the first 6 members of Parliament for the PLP, elected in 1956. He served until 1962. He served served as a member of the British forces in Jamaica during the war, and married his mother there. She was from Trelawney. And in 1965, I got the opportunity to spend 12 weeks vacation in Jamaica, in Trelawney, and got to know Jamaica quite intimately. Even learned how to hunt for crabs in the swamps, which I didn't learn here, so.
Kind of mix up.
Yeah, took a train. I think that was the year, I think it's 65 or 66. That was 66, it may have been. That was the year that the Commonwealth Games were held in Jamaica. Tommy Robinson and Harry Jerome ran against each other in what was the 220-yard dash, which Tommy pulled up at the end of the race, and the Canadian won the race. But I'm just showing the connections between the two of us. I'm just, therefore, enormously proud as a member of his family for his accomplishment as president of the Court of Appeal. And in some senses, I can't believe that in our recent memory, two of us who were just running around in short pants are now actually leaders in a country which would have been basically unimaginable back in 66 or 65. And so on this occasion, I want to take the opportunity to congratulate him on his ascendancy to this job. And I'm certain he'll do a good job. And I understand he's getting married in August. Congratulations on that too. And I wish him well in this new job. But to come more centrally to the bill, Madam President, there is a very ambitious legislative agenda which the PLP has. And I was really impressed last week when the Deputy Leader of Government Business in the House, Member of Parliament for Golden Gates, announced, or she was going over how we're going to deal with the legislative business going forward and how we're going to allocate the parliamentary time, particularly given the fact that the summer recess is coming, and what can we get in before that recess comes. And in addition to what is already listed here, which we have to get done, or hoping to get done, there's some things which the Foreign Ministry wants to get done. There's some amendments to the Parliamentary Service Act which have to get done. There's some legislation to formally incorporate the Progressive Liberal Party so that it separates its assets from those of its trustees. But the issue always is drafting. In order to get bills to this place, you need draftsmen. And the people who are responsible for drafting legislation are the law reform commissioners. So the more people we can get there, employed there, the better. And the people who have the skills to advance those things, the better. And that is why, one of the reasons why I'm happy to support this particular piece of legislation. And this has been a long-standing complaint, the question of drafting and getting legislation before Parliament. In fact, most of the Commonwealth parliaments have what they call a parliamentary draftsman person, so that in fact, a draftsman works for Parliament. There's a whole department of draftspeople for the Parliament. And so drafting can actually take place if you need to make changes, and we're not making changes here on the fly. That, of course, will come in time. But I think it's important to explain some of these things to the public so that they get an understanding of what you actually face when you're trying to get things moved to the Parliament. One of the points I've made several times is a point which is not new to me, but which Michael Manley explained to me when he was talking about in 1980 about why he had lost and the inability to complete their programs had to do with whether or not the public administration can execute what the political level says they want to execute. So drafting is a part of that. You can make a decision as a cabinet that you want X piece of legislation, but that's got to be converted by a draftsperson into law, which actually comes before the Parliament, and it's got to make sense, particularly since member for St. Anne's will be going through it with a fine-tooth comb. So we have to be extremely careful that we have a good draftsperson just for him. So the drafting is what this is about. And I'd also like to repeat something which, if you read our Constitution, which also explains how things get done. The Constitution gives the executive authority of the government to the cabinet. So the executive functions of the government are carried out by the cabinet. The cabinet acts by cabinet papers and a cabinet conclusion. And the cabinet conclusion is supposed to describe, in particular, what the public officials are to do. So very often you will find that a permanent secretary who is in charge of running a department will not act on any policy initiative until they actually see what the cabinet ordered to be done. And the cabinet, as I said, the orders are listed in what is called a cabinet conclusion. And those cabinet conclusions have to be very particular in describing what actually needs to be done. On the foreign relations side, one of the reasons we have been so active in the Commonwealth is because there's something called the Commonwealth Fund for Technical Cooperation. And this has been one of the sources of getting technical expertise on trying to bring advanced legislation forward. So, for example, there's this fund in the Commonwealth. And if you have a problem on a specific issue, you can go to the Commonwealth Fund for Technical Cooperation. They often supply experts. They often supply draftspeople who will come in, do model legislation for you. So when it comes to the drafting people in Nassau, they basically take the model legislation and adapt it to the needs of the Bahamas. So that's one of the reasons why we continue to maintain our relationship with the Commonwealth bodies in its multilateral in the multilateral context. Our founding fathers, in fact, made a commitment to multilateralism when they joined many of these organizations and said that the context of our foreign policy would be within the context of multilateralism. We have raised a concern with many of the developed countries they call the ABCs, and India has actually joined them because this fund has been denuded and in fact defunded. And one hopes that by the lobbying that we've been doing over the last year or so, that refunding will take place for us because this is an important aspect of what we need from that particular international body. And this comes then to the question of the Civil Aviation Authority and the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Amendment bills, where changes are being made to the law, which, if I read them correctly, would give the persons who have the executive functions in these bodies a certain level of independence with regard to the decisions they make with regard to the conduct of our civil aviation. This is similar to provisions that were put in the law by previous governments about the central bank, where the governor of the central bank is able to make decisions independent of the political authority with regard to the monetary supply, the money supply. One of the things that happens on a regular, I'm sorry? Yes, right, that was your doing. One of the things that happens is that there's an audit which takes place of many of our facilities in the Bahamas, including, I think we've got 28 international airports, and all of them, is it? 28 international airports. I think they all have to pass a particular test if international air traffic, largely to the United States, is to be acceptable. And they have to have standards of of security, access, what actually gets on aircraft, those kinds of things. And of course, there's a similar thing for the ports. So the amendments to the legislation on the Civil Aviation Authority and the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Amendment Bill and the Civil Aviation Amendment Bill are all designed to comply with some of the tests and recommendations which have been made as a result of the audits by these international organizations. And it is therefore a convenient point to raise again why the government has such an active foreign policy role, because we need to be able to influence what happens in these international bodies as they set standards which will affect us in the Bahamas. And the Bahamas needs to have these standards if we are to continue to have the high level of commercial traffic and interchange which we have, particularly in our tourism sector. So that is the raison d'etre, so to speak, of these laws. Today, Madam Speaker, is the third day since the Parliamentary Service Act came into force. There was a statement last week which also announced the creation of the court services, the coming into force of the Court Services Act. Both of these acts are in pursuance of the fleshing out of our independence and the constitutional reform that we've been talking about for ages, which gives the Parliament some authority over its own affairs. This is something which many of us have been fighting for some time, and I'm looking forward to the execution of it, particularly as we come to the stage where the design of our new building is going to take place. I was downstairs just a few minutes ago, and I couldn't get any soap out of the dispenser because it's broken. So, you know, I said, there's another reason why we need a new building. So that is to come. But I want to, I only make that in the context of this. This morning, I looked in the gallery, and there were the faces of some people, young people, men and women, who looked to be about 16 or 17, I would guess. There was a time when I used to look like that. And I thought to myself, as I watched them there, some of them probably had on suits for the first time. And they're probably quite excited about sitting here in the gallery and looking at these people who actually run the country today. And they should know that one day that they will be here too. And so when I speak now, I want to make it clear that there's an explanation of how business is done and conducted, what the standards are of debate, the level of debate, and that members of Parliament bring to this business their individual consciences to be able to influence what happens in the country. So there are two roles of a member of Parliament. One is you can be a delegate, which means that for a particular constituency, you've come here to represent their views. Many people say that. But there's a second role, which is to bring your individual conscience to the business of government. And sometimes you exercise that as a delegate, and sometimes you exercise your individual conscience. But the two must come to government. And members of Parliament, Arthur Hanna used to always say this, our members are national politicians. They are parliamentarians for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, even though they are elected administratively for particular constituencies. We could have chosen another way. We could have gone proportional representation. You got to find some mechanism to get people into the House. And we chose to do first past the post, which is you have a constituency which you represent. But never forget that when you serve in this place, whether as a senator or as a member of Parliament, you are a national politician. And so the country is, so to speak, your bailiwick, and you bring your individual conscience to the fact, and you also bring to it the fact that you represent the views of those people in the constituency who elected you to office. So those are the few remarks I'd like to make in support of this. As I said, mainly I wanted to use this opportunity to congratulate John Isaacs on his appointment as President of the Court of Appeal. I've often wondered why he was overlooked for these top jobs in the past. I figured maybe it had something to do with the fact that his pa was a PLP representative. Maybe, just saying. But an excellent judge.
Yes.
Sound decisions.
Yes.
And I have no doubt that going forward, he will defend the Constitution uphold the laws of our country and make our family and our country proud of those decisions which he makes. So congratulations to him again, and it's my privilege and honor to support these pieces of legislation. I've also had an update from Jamaica. They are in what appears to be in the middle of the storm, so to speak. The bulletin, which was posted this morning, indicates that they will be expecting the weather to subside at about 8 p.m. this evening. When I spoke to the Consul General a few minutes ago, she said lots of wind and rain, and the power has been off in many places, but basically they seem to be holding their own at this point. We'll keep monitoring the situation and seek to advise the House if there's any emergency. There are, as far as we know, 4 Bahamians who are still on the University of the West Indies campus. They've all been moved to one hall, which has power generation at the hall. So far, the Bahamians that we know of are safe, including 3 Bahamian citizens who are in a hotel in Montego Bay, which is on the north coast. The storm is actually going to pass along the southern coast, so the weather is less severe where those people are. But as I say, we'll continue to monitor the situation, and to the extent that we can provide information to the public, we shall. So thank you for this opportunity, and of course I support the pieces of legislation.
Thank you, honorable member.